This happened around 2004 or 2005 when I was about 13 years old, in a rural area outside the small town of Uvalde, Texas. Back then, Uvalde was not much to look at and wasn't really on the way to anywhere significant. My father knew someone who owned a deer lease of about 1,000 acres nearby. The owner was frustrated with a large number of hogs damaging the land. Since it was open season for hogs in the South, my dad decided to surprise me that summer by taking me hunting for a week. It was a great opportunity for him to network for work while also spending quality father-son time together. The drive from Dallas was torturous. About 7 hours in my dad's hardtop Jeep Wrangler, which was incredibly uncomfortable. I either stared out the window or tried, and failed, to beat Super Mario Land 2 on my Game Boy Pocket. We arrived in the early evening, and the landowner had warned my dad that the cabin might be a bit rough and dusty since no one had leased it that year. I didn't mind. I was used to camping from my years in Scouts and was comfortable roughing it. After unlocking the gate and driving to the cabin, we settled in. The cabin was indeed dusty, with flies everywhere, and it looked like raccoons had gotten inside and left a mess. We cleaned up a bit, set up our sleeping bags and cots, and decided to sleep. However, something felt off that night. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and I struggled to fall asleep. Around 7 a.m., we woke up and decided to scout the area for tracks and signs of hogs. Since it was summer and extremely hot in the afternoon, the morning was the best time to be out. After walking for about an hour, we found a lightly dense area of trees with signs of hog activity. We followed the signs deeper into the woods until my dad stopped me with his arm. I looked up and saw someone standing about 50 yards away, partially obscured by trees. Since this was private land and the gate had been locked upon our arrival, we knew this person shouldn't be there. My dad called out, "Hey, we're hunters, this is private land," but the person didn't move at all. He was wearing a bright red jacket and stood completely still, with his hands in his pockets. What struck me as odd was that he was wearing a ski jacket and ski pants in the Texas summer heat, where it was around 98 degrees. My dad called out again, but there was no reaction. He told me to stay behind him and unsnap his pistol holster. Since we were only scouting, our rifles were back at the cabin. We approached the figure from the right side, and my dad instructed me to stay put about 20 yards away. I crouched down as I watched him circle around to the front of the man. When my dad finally reached the front, he stood up with a confused look on his face. I called out, "What's wrong?" He replied, "It's a mannequin." I walked over to it while my dad stared. As I got closer, one detail stood out. The clothes were brand new, no dust, no sap, no bird droppings, indicating they hadn't been outside for more than a day. At that moment, I could see my dad start to worry, and I felt it too, like we were being watched. I wanted to cry. Suddenly, I was terrified. My dad whispered, "We're leaving right now." He grabbed my hand and drew his pistol, scanning the area as we hurried back to the cabin. I was so scared that it felt like an eternity, but in reality, it took us only about 45 minutes to return. Once back, we packed up quickly and left. My dad called the landowner on the way home, but he was confused and said he'd check it out the following week. He assured my dad that he had never had issues with trespassers because his property was high-fenced. My dad isn't usually paranoid, but given the situation, he felt it was best to leave. Later, we discussed the experience, and it turned out my dad hadn't been able to sleep the night before either. He had felt uneasy but didn't want to wake me. The following week, the landowner checked the property and found no sign of anyone. No mannequin or anything. This story still gives me chills. I have no idea what that was, but I can't shake the feeling it was some kind of trap. It wasn't the creepiest thing that ever happened to me in the woods, but it ranks in the top 3. I'm glad we never encountered whoever or whatever was out there.